people aren't prioritizing the recovery as much as they should, and so that you end up having more soreness from a workout that wouldn't otherwise give you that soreness. So I think chasing soreness as opposed to chasing progress in the gym is probably a bad thing to do. Like, you should probably be chasing numbers with good technique rather than chasing soreness week over week. And so long as those numbers are progressing and your volume is going up across a particular period and your strength is going up across a particular period, then you don't need to necessarily get sore. But if the target muscle is getting sore, then it's a good way to tell, like, oh, like, actually something happened there. I did work that muscle.
It's one thing to have big arms. It's a completely different story to have big shredded arms. I'm here with Tristyn Lee, who's got some pretty darn shredded arms. We're gonna go through an actual arm workout, and then we're gonna jump in and we're gonna talk nutrition. What was your pre-workout looking like on this?
So an hour and a half before, I had about 75 grams of carbs, just in straight white rice, 25 grams of protein from like a lean protein, something that's not too high in fat because I didn't want to slow digestion of the carbohydrates going into the workout.
And we're gonna kind of weave it back and forth. So it's gonna be sort of a soup to nuts complete guide on how we get shredded arms, how we get big arms, and the nutrition to back it up. So man, first off, I like to say this, where can everyone find you, first of all?
Tristyn Lee pretty much on all the platforms. That's it, yeah.
Cool, man.
I've been drinking LMNT for 7 years, not just as a traditional electrolyte, but as something that curbs my appetite through the course of the day. So that link down below gets you a free sample variety pack. When you get any purchase with LMNT, you get that free variety pack. So you can try all the different flavors. They've got a sparkling as well, which is something that's really been a game changer for me because it feels like I'm drinking a soda, but without the sugar, without the carbs, without the nonsense, without the hidden nasty stuff, just straight up electrolytes in a sparkling can. But I still love their stick packs. Their stick packs are what get me through a lot of my workouts. It makes life easier for me. I'm not thinking about food all the time because I have something that I can sip on that curbs my appetite and is also mineralizing my body. So that link down below, drinklmnt.com/Thomas, is for that free sample variety pack with any purchase.
All right, so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna go through a segment that I would do for my arms, and I'd call it a little bit more metabolic arms. One of the things I like to think about is with arms, it's accessory work usually. You're not usually doing anything crazy. You're not squatting, you're not shoulder pressing, you're not anything like that. So for that, I like to get my heart rate up. I like to keep lean. I like to get blood pumped in there. So for me, I'll do a lot of like compound sets and supersets, drop sets, really keep it moving fast. And you have a little bit of a different approach with things, right?
For sure, yeah. When it comes to like the bodybuilding aspect of things, I like to keep it fairly basic and just stick to the fundamental principles. So I'll do more so straight sets if I'm not trying to get my heart rate up quite as much and more focused on performance-based activities. So I'll try to, hit a particular rep target for a particular number of sets and then move on into something that may be a little bit more high intensity, which would be similar to your workout.
Sweet. So we'll just jump right into it and then stick around because after we go through the workout, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna talk what our nutrition strategy is like, specifically when it comes down to building muscle while staying lean. I guess if we go with what I would jump on with first, weighted dips, supersetted with pull-ups, and we're gonna do what I call kind of it's like a bouncing drop set. So it's a combination of drop set and superset. So in other words, I'll load quite a bit of weight with dips, which I call the squat of the upper body because it's really, it's one of the only arm upper body movements that you're like getting really just a lot of pieces moving. So we'll start with a decent size weight, immediately superset to a pull-up. When I'm doing the pull-ups, you're doing the dips.
Sounds good.
And then we'll swippity swap and we'll keep moving, but each time we drop, switch, we'll drop the weight a little bit. So it'll be like a descending weight, like a drop set combined with a superset. So it's gonna get the heart rate fast.
Perfect.
All right, so first round, we're just gonna go all the way to failure. I really don't even like to count reps. I just go on feel. So I go to failure.
I don't use a weighted belt too often.
Going old school with it, man.
Yeah, no kidding.
Go a little bit narrower grip. So I get a little more arm action. Right to the races, man. That form, he's got that depth, getting that stretch. Man. I mean, you're moving a lot of blood to a lot of your chest tries, back buys, like quick superset. While he's doing that, I'm setting up for slightly lighter dips. Money. And when I do dips, I definitely want the stretch, but I really try to focus that squeeze at the top because I know we're gonna move into some stretching movements later. So I just want that real tight squeeze at the top, that contraction.
Did you drop the weight a couple pounds?
Yep, that went from it's about a 10-pound drop, 8-pound drop. Okay, same thing, relatively close grip, not even counting reps. Nice, come on. Screw it, man, you got one more. Get it, get it, get it. Hit it all the way, all the way. Squeeze it. Yeah, you got it. Head up, head up, head up. Nice. Tristyn's a young buck, but when you get to be my ripe age, one of the things that I've noticed over time is when I do dips, I tend to put my head down. So I cued for him to put the head up, not because he was doing anything wrong, but because I've noticed with like cervical spine stuff, keeping that head and that spine straight when you do dips makes a big difference. Now I'm gonna work my hands in a little closer, so it's a little less chest, a little more tricep-y. So notice now it's a little bit more upright. Yeah, when they go, they go. Now on this third time through, I'm gonna switch to supine. Chin up. That's the trick. One more good one. Elbows back, elbows back. Here you go. Hit it, hit it. Head up, head up, head up. There you go. Breathe. Bicep action, man. Now we bring those arms in. I'm gonna go this way. Just to get the arm hand position a little bit different. And this one, just pumping it out. This will be the last set of these. And try to get that tempo up on that last set. I'm gonna ditch this and burn it out.
Last set, drive, come on.
Take it away. Good stretch. Excellent, there you go. Get it. Ditch the weight, pump them out. 1, 1, 1, 1 tempo on this last one. Burn it, fast tempo. Come on, 2 more, you got it, get it. Hit it. It's all in the head, man, it's all in the head. Let's go. Boom.
Thank you.
And burn them away. And just go for tempo on this one too, pump them. Come on, 2 more, 2 more. All biceps on this one. Boom, it's all you. All you. Boom. Oh, good set. That gets him going. When you have shredded arms, a lot of it comes down to displacement, right? Like being able to engorge the arm more so it appears leaner, right? I think people, yes, there's some evidence that you could spot reduce in some ways, but in my opinion, it takes a very experienced person to achieve that metabolic effect. I think most beginners are probably not gonna just spot reduce in their arms, get lean arms, but the bigger that your arms get, just by sheer displacement, you're gonna make your arms look leaner.
For sure.
You know, that's why you look so much leaner when you have a pump too. It's just like you're actually just stretching out. If you've got that much fat, now that fat's getting stretched out. So I think chasing the pump, although sounds very bro-y, I think it's a very legit thing. You know, in your style of training, do you focus a lot on a pump, or is it a little bit more just straight up? I mean, we're gonna go to your stuff next, but.
So with all my training, I have multiple, I guess, proxies for whether or not it's like effective for whatever the goal is. And for me, it's hypertrophy or building muscle, which obviously gives the illusion of like having leaner, fuller, more aesthetic arms in general. So pump is one of those proxies. Like if you have good technique, your tempo's good, you're working near failure, you should be getting a pump in the target muscle. So on an exercise like a dip, if you're trying to target your triceps, you should probably have a pump in your triceps in order to effectively work the target muscle. And the same thing applies to pretty much any other movement. So although it's not like the only thing that I think about, I think there's value to, at some points, chasing pump to have a like beneficial effect on mind-muscle connection or being able to actually stimulate the target muscle for growth. Yeah.
Do you think there's an effect on even internal leverage? Like the more blood that you get into a muscle, like then all of a sudden you can start actually getting more of that activation of internal leverage, sort of like the difference people say when they take creatine, for example. There's obviously a muscle volumizing effect that creates more leverage that allows them to actually lift more and feel like they're concentrating the muscle more.
Potentially, and I think especially in early stages of people's training careers when they're not as aware of like how their body works and different movement patterns, things like that, it's something that's a good cue to be able to actually fire the target muscle. So I think there definitely is a little bit of a point to that, but I think overall, if you're doing good technique, you should be getting a pump. Yeah. And it's kind of like one helps the other, which came first, chicken or the egg, you know?
Totally. So Tristyn takes a little bit more of a conventional bodybuilding approach to training arms, which, don't get me wrong, when you're building muscle, conventional, traditional movements probably take the cake. For me, I really like to get that metabolic drive. I like to have my heart rate up, But I feel like us combined create this nice little synergy of the metabolic piece that we're looking at, but also just the traditional compound movements, not even compound, but in this case, just a traditional bodybuilding type movement. And I think people get in this myopic mindset where they either want to do one or the other. They're either in a cutting mode or a bulking mode, or they're more Metcon people or bodybuilding people. And I think there is a crossover in how you train that can get you all those pieces, mentally satisfy you, get some cardiovascular effect, and also, of course, get the mass.
For sure. So since we kind of got the two, I guess, metabolic or the metabolic superset out of the way, I figured we'd go back to some more standard bodybuilding movements. We just do a simple barbell curl. You'll see the techniques more emphasizing just your biceps rather than a pull-up, which is gonna hit your lats and other muscle groups as well. We're gonna do a typical barbell curl, and then immediately we'll go right into a superset with triceps, because triceps and biceps don't really affect each other. One's not gonna be fatigued from the other working, and they're not centrally fatiguing movements that are gonna be super cardiovascularly exhausting. We can jump right back and forth between the two. So we'll do a dumbbell overhead extension, and then we'll superset that with just a typical barbell curl. And with the barbell curl, we're working a little bit heavier rep ranges, but still with good technique, controlled eccentrics, and full range of motion.
Okay. What's your rep range on these guys?
7 to 10, anywhere in there.
You roll right into them, or you give it a couple minutes or a couple seconds, or what?
Yeah, we can take some time between. I normally wouldn't superset them.
Yeah, I've always found throughout my years that I put on just as much muscle staying lean as I ever did dirty bulking in any way. Like, it doesn't seem to negatively affect me staying lean when it comes to putting muscle on. And I think the evidence backs that up pretty strong too.
Yeah, I think so long as your performance is improving and you're able to continue to increase your strength week over week with the same technique, then you're fine. You don't need to aggressively bulk by any means. But I think depending on your genetics, different people will have different genetic set points. So for me, I'm able to stay sub 10% and make a lot of progress. But for the majority of people, I think anywhere in that kind of 12 range is probably optimal. And pushing beyond 15, there's no benefit.
Yeah, agreed. I think it comes down to that allosteric load, so to speak. You know, if you're super, super lean and it's hard on your body to be that lean, then you're not able to give it your all. You know, you're not able to actually train the way, because at the end of the day, the number one stimulus for building muscle is training, period. You know, followed by protein, followed by calories, followed by carbs, right, in that order. And I think if you are so lean that you're not able to train, you know, you're taking that main primary stimulus and bringing it from here down to here. So you got to kind of stay where you need to be to still be lean, but still be able to push, right? If you and I are able to stay at 7, 8, 9% without a problem, you know, that could be a genetic thing for us too, right?
For sure, absolutely.
So you're gonna do double arm overhead extension?
I'm just doing single.
Okay.
I just like using another weight as counterbalance.
Got it. Nice. What's your take on proximity to failure and importance?
I think that if your goal is to build muscle, you should probably be within that 0 to 3 reps of failure.
Yeah.
And I think the average person overestimates how close they are to failure. So most people think, oh, that was 1 rep shy of failure, but reality is it was 4 or 5 reps, especially with movements that are more like isolated.
Yeah.
With a squat, it's like, you know, if you squat, you're risking more injury and things like that. But I think if you're trying to build muscle, staying in that 0 to 3 reps in reserve is the most optimal range.
Yep.
And I think most people could get most of their benefits in that 1 to 3 reps in reserve and not have to go to absolute failure, and would probably actually get more benefits from shying away from going to complete an absolute failure all the time, because they're not going to be able to recover for the following week to continue to progressively overload. So
what's your take on, say, well, even rep ranges within a given respective range, like not going crazy high or crazy low, but I mean, do you think there's a huge difference between training at 7-8 reps compared to, I don't know, some people like to train in that 20 range?
that as long as you're close to failure, you're going to get pretty similar results. And then it's just a matter of how good of a stimulus you get in the form of pumps, soreness, fatigue, those sort of things, relative to like which rep range you're in. So if you find that you're killing yourself doing 20 reps cardiovascularly, but you're not really feeling the stimulus as much to the target muscle, like you're not getting as sore, you're not getting as good of a pump, then maybe try shifting to a different rep range. But I think as long as you're close to failure, there's not really an issue with either rep range.
Have you found soreness to be, in your opinion, a decent barometer for the workout? Or do you find that, like, you're still in your early 20s, so do you find that like soreness is that barometer, or are there other factors of your life that can contribute to you being more sore from a workout that ordinarily wouldn't be?
For sure, I think that's usually the case. Like people aren't prioritizing the recovery as much as they should, and so that ends up you end up having more soreness from a workout that wouldn't otherwise give you that soreness. So I think chasing soreness as opposed to chasing progress in the gym is probably a bad thing to do. Like you should probably be chasing numbers with good technique rather than chasing soreness week over week. And so long as those numbers are progressing and your volume is going up across a particular period and your strength is going up across a particular period, then you don't need to necessarily get sore. But if the target muscle is getting sore, then it's a good way to tell, like, oh, like actually something happened there. I did work that muscle, you know?
Yep. Okay, well maybe it'll be okay if I'm like a little closer to 10% body fat all the time, and like it'll help my recovery. But then I like try to eat a little bit more to get there, and I think I'm fortunate, like it actually doesn't really happen. Like I think I could actually probably eat a lot more.
And maintain the same body count.
Yeah, because like I've been really, I shouldn't say I've been trying hard to put on like a little extra like softness to like recover, but I've definitely like said, okay, like I'm gonna allow myself to eat a little more. And it's the only thing that happens sometimes is like maybe a little more water retention, so I'd say it's pretty easy for me to stay lean.
So it's one of those things like you're talking about, like what does it take to get to that body fat percentage? Because if you're maintaining high amounts of cardio or having to do high amounts of cardio or high amounts of, or chronically dieting, those sort of things, like those factors play into how long you can maintain a particular body fat percentage. Yeah. So as metabolic adaptation occurs, like as you get leaner and leaner and leaner, or as you stay lean for an extended period of time, it becomes more and more difficult to keep that body fat percentage. Yeah. And so if your lifestyle habits are changing and that's affecting your sleep, that's affecting your training performance, it's going to be more difficult to maintain.
Agreed.
Versus the person who gets the most out of the least. So if you're not chronically dieting, you're not lowering your calories down to absolutely zero, you're not doing 20,000 steps a day and hit 4 or 5 times a week, you're just only adjusting little minor variables to get to a particular body composition and optimizing your metabolism, your training performance, those sort of things, it's going to be easier to maintain that year round.
For sure. And I find I'm a fan of the constrained energy model, which basically implies that your body has almost a set number of calories anyway that it kind of wants to go through in a given day. Yeah. And what I find is that if I eat more, I inadvertently start moving more.
Right.
I fidget more. It just happens.
Your knee goes up.
Yep. And my desire to want to go run or do cardio just goes up. Yeah. And then if I don't do those things, I feel like I'm being disingenuous to my soul, because it's like my body's telling me no, move. Yeah. I'm not going to force myself to be sedentary when my body's telling me to move, right? So I think that's the nice thing about having a good functional metabolism is it should self-regulate.
And adjust, for sure.
I find if I do these seated, it puts my pelvic floor and puts my pelvis in a slightly different position where I can get a deeper stretch without putting my spine into old man problems. Nice thing about doing sort of a workout like this where we've got the more straight sets and then also more superset compound drop set is we're able to get that sort of cardio-metabolic function without having to deliberately do cardio. I mean, I like cardio personally, but I would much rather do cardio in a drop set fashion than any other way. Other than running. Running makes me really happy, but like the idea of just going on a treadmill for 45 minutes, I'd much rather do something like metabolic type training for 45 minutes, you know?
Yeah, and if you're limited on time as well, trying to make the most out of, you have 45 minutes in a day, you want to get the most out of your arms training session, which isn't going to be the most metabolic training, then throwing in supersets or full body movements that are getting your heart rate and intensity up, working multiple muscle groups at the same time can be extremely beneficial, you know?
Agreed, man. If someone's trying to build more arm size, in your opinion, do you feel like having a deliberate arm day is best, or do you think almost deliberately hitting them, you know, a few times per week at the end of a workout so you're getting multiple touch points is slightly better?
It's hardly ever the case that arms training in itself is lowering someone's systemic recovery to the point that they need a complete separate arm day.
Yeah.
So it can be thrown in at the end of a workout. That being said, if you are trying to prioritize any sort of muscle group, putting it at the beginning of your workout or having a separate arm day will allow you to get the most quality volume that you can out of that particular session. So for someone who just throws in a couple sets of bicep curls at the end of their workout and they're kind of half-assed, they're not anywhere near failure, they're not progressively overloading, yeah, maybe that person should say, okay, I'm going to dedicate the time to either A, put it now towards the start of my workout when I have the most energy and mental capacity, or put a completely separate arm day just so that allows for that full focus and intention into those sets. Because the quality of your reps is everything, and the quality of your sets is everything. It doesn't matter. You can do endless amounts of volume, but if none of those are effective reps, it doesn't mean anything.
That's a money shot right there. That's exactly what it is. How can you maintain intensity?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that comes down to just your internal wiring. What works best for you in terms of being able to actually squeeze out within 0 to 3 of failure? Does it mean that you give yourself a deliberate day so you can get your head in the game? Or, you know, for me, I actually push it harder a lot of times, sometimes at the end of my workout than I do at the beginning, because I get inside my own head. And I know people are like this too. Like if I were to train arms at the beginning, I would psychosomatically kind of like
save your energy.
Save my energy, you know, and that's the endurance athlete in me. Is like, why would I exhaust this? I'd rather be able to like flip a switch of kinesthetic awareness at the end of a workout and kick it into this extra gear that comes out of nowhere. So a lot of times, like I will hit arms at the end of a workout just because it's like, you know, everything's toasted, but like I'd be totally lying to myself if I said I couldn't, you know, go squeeze out 3 sets of biceps or something.
For sure. That whole last set, best set idea.
Yep, exactly. All right, so we're doing 3 total, so is it start
Yeah,
there?
we'll do one more.
All right. I'm gonna go narrow grip on this one just for something different.
For sure. You did these with Mike and Jared, right?
Yeah.
Barbell curls?
Yeah.
Where they had you do the Jared
Oh, yeah,
curls
those
where
are
they
awesome,
push
man.
out in front?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Might only get 6 or 7 with the close grip here. Cheater rep. Come on. I think there was a study at the end of 2024. I think it was, I know Menno Henselmans had posted something about it. It was like that cheat reps just as effective.
Just as effective, yeah.
Yep. Which I think is really, now, there is a caveat to that. What I read in that paper that not a lot of people like really dug into. So cheat rep being like that last rep I did there, total cheat rep where I got a pop to it. The caveat is the cheat rep has to be with a load that would elicit a response. So if you're doing sets of 30 reps and you're cheating with a really light weight, it's not gonna be as effective as if you're cheating with like a 6 rep range. So that is the caveat within that paper, is that if you're gonna cheat,
You need the mechanical tension.
exactly. It needs to be a weight that's worthy of cheating.
Right.
So if like I'm sitting here with a 20-pound barbell going, you know, calf plyometrics, That's not.
The other caveat is that you don't tear a bicep on week 2 of your program, right? So I guess like that's the argument against G reps is the injury risk.
Yes.
But I think what majority of people see as G reps, like as long as you have the intention that you have, which your ego's out of it most of the time.
Yeah.
Like you have an understanding of what good technique is, and I'm sure there's a range you're willing to push it. Like you're not going to throw 225 on and just try to like rip from the start. It's like, okay, I did 6 or 7 clean reps where I'm controlling, and then now on 8, 9, I have a little bit of give without risking a shitload of injury. You know what I mean?
You are wise beyond your years for 22, my man.
Oh, last set.
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna do single arm like you on this.
Sure,
one.
why not? Look, we're the same height now.
Yeah. Grandpa sitting here. Come sit on my lap. Tell you a story about when I was cool. I lose that at the end range. I almost have to self-spot myself a little bit. Here's what I'm thinking for biceps, and I'll let you pick the final tricep.
Sure.
And let's work on this one. So we're gonna tackle this 3-headed beast here. So the metabolic, the straight set, and now taking a little bit more of a playbook out of maybe some RP type stuff, getting a little more stretch focus, even though that movement we just did was very stretch.
Sure.
I'll choose biceps, you choose triceps. For biceps, one of my favorite stretch ones where we are actually doing a bicep curl in a little bit of a compromised situation by being in this position, but a very lightweight where you're getting an extreme stretch and really focusing on that bottom range. Mm-hmm. Evidence is not clear on whether like specific range training is any better for hypertrophy. I'm inclined to think from an IGF response, what happens when a muscle is in an extreme stretch position, there is an effect on the nervous system that may potentially trigger a little bit of growth because of the sheer amount of like, I don't want to say pain, but in a way it is. It's like by eliciting more pain, you are actually stimulating a potential growth factor. So that was like the old DC training kind of philosophy. And there is something to it, at least in my mind. So they'd be like a stretch, like almost a bicep curl, where you're doing almost a, where you're keeping your upper arms as perpendicular to the floor as you can. So that's option 1, which is a really fun one. I wanted to share it either way.
Sure.
Or we can go kicking it old school and do 21s. If you had to choose
21s of the barbell?
Barbell, yep.
I would probably prefer the stretch.
Okay.
Especially towards the end of the workout when you're more fatigued, you're just able to lighten the load up and just really focus on getting that good stretch. So again, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Now I gotta find the equivalent for a tricep movement.
We got cables over there too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So I mean, we could either do like a katana extension with like the cables overhead. Okay. Or we could just do a simple overhead extension. I mean, we kind of exhausted all fronts when it comes to like we did a pressing kind of motion. So I mean, another option is instead of doing like an insane stretch, we just do a typical push down, which I'm good with that too. Yeah. But I'm open to whatever you prefer because like
let's do that. Let's show some proper push down technique.
Yeah.
So these used to be a serious personal favorite of mine. So the idea here, if you have like any kind of shoulder issue, rotator cuff thing, you may want to just exercise some caution on this. I can show you an alternative for that. The idea here is not to go heavy, but the main trick that you want to keep is you do want to keep that upper arm as perpendicular to the floor as you can get. So when you're doing your curl, you don't want to come up, okay? And try to keep your head back, and you're just, you've ever heard of slider curls when you're doing like with a barbell and you're trying to like slide the bar up along your body? It's like the same sort of impact on the bicep. You don't want to like reach out in front of you and curl. You want to like do a drag kind of curl, and you're really focusing on that stretch at the bottom.
the most extreme version of an incline curl.
Exactly. Don't go heavy. The idea is not to go heavy. You don't need much weight. And your head is naturally going to want to come up. So just, keep that awareness.
Come on. Good.
One more. Oh, man. It just dies.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah, I think that's where most people get it messed up as far as injury risk, is that explosion out of the deep stretch.
Yeah.
As long as it's controlled, you should be fine most of the time. It's the same idea as like, I don't know if you've ever done like Bayesian curls.
Yep.
It's the exact same movement.
Yep.
It's just, this is probably more beneficial than a general like a barbell curl or even just a normal dumbbell curl, because you're actually loading in the stretch position as opposed to just being like no tension on your biceps at the bottom. So.
Yeah, from an athletic standpoint, these kinds of movements have potential to train you across these vulnerable ranges.
For sure.
You know, where, like this kind of movement I could see being highly effective for martial arts, where you might end up in a situation where you're in an extreme stretch,
and need to produce force. Yeah.
And the other cue that I didn't give, that I'll give you now, is try to keep the elbows slightly pointed back behind. Yeah, there you go. So it's like you're keeping the barbell or the dumbbell as close to the bench as possible. There you go, like that. So you're not flaring out. I mean, you're gonna flare out a little bit, but you wanna try not to. There you go. Yeah, that's insane, man. Yeah, striations, crazy. That separation in there is nuts, man. And the nice thing about these, the stretch, don't be afraid, like, yeah, there you go. I was gonna say on that last rep, if you need to kind of almost do a partial, that's fine. One of the things, I think there is a genetic component to it, but man, when I was first wanting to build my arms, I don't know about you, but like one of the things that inspired me the most was Branch Warren, and seeing when his arm was just at rest, it was like this shelf that would just, and that's what I've always liked. It's like, it's one thing to have a bicep when you're flexed, but it's another thing when it's just like a shelf.
Relaxed.
Like that. And I found that doing this kind of, I mean, again, some people will say like all or nothing principle. You're just like, no matter what, all muscle fibers are firing. Call me crazy, and I could get scientifically scrutinized for this, but I feel that low, right? And it feels like it's doing something there. And without a doubt, I've noticed, improvement in sort of that lower bicep that way. But, I could just be totally crazy.
Yeah, well, I think the nature of loading in a stretch position and being in this almost extended outwards position, you're not often in that. When you're doing a normal barbell curl, this is still shortened. So I think you're probably more likely, even if it's mentally, to feel it at like, the peak or whatever.
Yeah.
It's training the whole bicep, but because you're not in this position, it may lend itself to connecting better to that particular portion, and even just emphasizing that deep stretch that you wouldn't get there. So when you're building the overall bicep, to have that deep stretch is obviously going to be more beneficial than not. So most people, when they do a push down, will let their elbows flare, lean over it, those sort of things. What I'm going to do is, instead of just like letting my elbows fall up like this where there's not really much tension, I'm almost pulling my elbows back and towards each other, so that the elbow angle is actually deeper than if I'm just like this. And then when I'm in this position, the tension and the force is still in line. So my tricep is getting the majority of the stretch.
Yeah, that outer head of the tricep on you is nuts. Now, do you usually train fasted, or do you usually eat something?
Usually I'll eat something.
Yeah. What time of day do you usually train?
11.
Okay.
I've been enjoying training a little bit later, get a little bit more food.
Yeah.
I think more than food is electrolytes. Because if I don't have like sodium in my system, I can't get a pump. Can't train. Feel my like depletion as far as like my endurance is terrible when I'm training. But if I get enough electrolytes in, then I can train fasted and have something as an intra workout or a post workout.
For sure.
Be fine.
I'm pretty similar with that. The electrolytes are a must.
Yeah. Try to tuck those elbows just like the biceps. Yep. Almost try to touch them behind you when you're coming up and let that bar drag across you. Drive. Good. Come on. Keep the technique. Drive.
Man. It's one downside to having big lats, I guess. Not big.
Yeah, because you're asking about like proximity to failure and what my thoughts are around it are. So most people, like I said, get it mixed up how close they are actually to failure.
Yeah.
But when you're doing your reps, if you're keeping the same technique, eventually your reps start to slow down.
Yep.
And I think most people don't even look at that or acknowledge that when
true.
it comes to proximity to failure. And I think as long as your reps are slowing towards the end of your set, not just because you're saying, oh, I'm going to actively slow down my reps, but involuntarily because the load is heavy, you are going to be approaching failure. Like that's a good proxy of whether or not you're actually near failure.
That's a good point. That's the whole idea behind like velocity periodization, right?
Absolutely.
Like, there's even like some AI stuff now that can kind of look at that. It's kind of cool where you can just see like, you may not realize your velocity's slowing, but just do 2 rounds here.
Yeah.
Actually, for the hell of it, since we talked about 21s, we'll do 1 set of these curls and then 1 set of 21s because
Like stand up and then do 21s right away or what?
we'll drop, so we'll twist into it. So 21s, kicking it old school. I've always been a fan of full range first, bottom range, and then top range. Okay. Because it's hard to do bottom range when you're fatigued. So in this one, I'm not gonna do any kind of, I'm just gonna keep them supinated the whole time. So we'll do 7 full range.
Come on.
7 bottom range.
Top range.
Okay, top range.
The shoulder steady. Elbows. Drive, come on. Last set, come on. Yeah.
Come on.
Come on.
Oh, smokes. Yep.
You know it's a good set when you got yourself shaking like that.
Convulsions, yeah. A little lightheaded. Yeah, that's good. I would honestly say if there was one movement that built my biceps, it was that.
Would you say it's because of the nature of the movement, or would you say it's because you're more likely to push yourself towards absolute failure?
The latter, yeah. The latter. It's something about maintaining that intensity in that compartmentalized, you know, like you're able to do, like if you were to ask someone, look at, actually shaking. If you were to do 7 reps of something, ordinarily, it would be such a heavy weight that it would be kind of scary to push it really, really hard, like with bicep curls. Like, you know, you're like, that 7th rep, you're potentially using a load that could hurt you. But with this, it's like, mentally, you're like, I'm really kind of doing 3 sets of 7 with a light weight.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to that 3rd set, you know, that top portion, I mean, every single rep of those final 7 reps felt like the final 2 to 3 of a normal set. So I'm getting double the amount of that intensity. And it's all because of just that mental sort of segmentation that I can do with the
I think that's what it's like. Ask a marathon runner. They, you know, are they going to say, oh well, if I have to run this amount in like the entirety of it versus like splitting it up into 7. It's like, okay, just get to that 7 mark. Just get to that 7 mark. Just get to that. And so people are more likely to push themselves towards that failure portion if they have that kind of compartmentalized between 3 little small sets rather than. And I think it's the same thing with like myo reps, where you're reaching towards that target, but you just know, okay, I just got to get near failure, and then just near failure, and I'm a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and then by the end of it, you've reached absolute failure or near it enough to stimulate the growth. But
agreed. Yeah, agreed.
I think the way you do it as well, where you're starting with a full range, then going to a lengthened range, then going to a shortened range, is probably the best way to do it because you're putting yourself into a more mechanically advantageous position as you go through the set, rather than someone who says, you know, I'm going to try to do all of them and then do the full range. It's like, well, you're going to be most fatigued at the end, and then you're trying to do the full range all the way at the end. It's like, you're going to be fatigued, so it doesn't really make sense logically.
For sure. Yeah, run 3 5Ks and then do a marathon.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. You guys should have seen his left arm, man. Starting with full range, yeah?
Yep. Oh, this is going to be nice. Beautiful. Form is impeccable, man. Nice. Yep, you can fling them up there to get them up. Cool, you don't even have to go that low. Just go halfway, get that top squeeze. There you go. Come on. Flex those glutes, man. Don't hyperextend the back. Glutes flexed. There you go. Yeah. Come on. Now purposely take some time on these. Get the shakes going. Get the shakes going. Come on. You're there. Get it. Come on. Get it. Get it. Nice, dude.
That last one was brutal.
The cue that a good friend of mine gave me was just like, yeah, flex those quads and flex those glutes when you get into those. You were good, but like I have a tendency to you know, you get so focused on next thing you know, you start getting this. And it's not anything about, it's just, you don't, you know, why put your back into lordosis and, you know, if you don't have to. I'm going to do a drop on this one as the final burn. And when I drop, I'm going to do a reverse.
Sure. Come on.
So do something a little different next. I'm going to go reverse. I'm going to finish with a good stretch.
Come on. Last set. Drive, 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 drive. One more. Keep it strict. Drive, drive, drive. Elbows. Yeah.
That's fun. Yeah, you get that scapular retraction really good. That's a hard part for me.
It's because my lats aren't as big as yours.
Nice. Come on, brother. You got one more good one in there. One more. Hit it. Boom, boom. I'm not a fan of counting reps anymore.
Why is that?
I have a range, but I will, if I say 12, I find I'm gonna fatigue at 12. I actually, for a while, I made a point of purposely setting odd numbers. So if 12 was my normal range, I would go, I'm gonna do sets of 13, sets of 9, because I would do the same load that I would do 8 with, but I would set the number at 9. And it would be amazing how that works. Come on, bud. Get those elbows up. You got 2 more in you. Yeah, you got 2 more now. Come on. Elbows up. Gotcha. Squeeze it, squeeze it, squeeze it. One more good one, one more good one. And a 3-second negative on the way back. Boom. Elbows up. Negative, burn it. Boom, boom. Money. I got you. There we go.
Oh. Whew. It's good.
All right. Now we'll go and we'll talk nutrition a little bit. So we got the full soup to nuts thing here. Like, what do we do? What does our training look like? What does our nutrition look like?
So what would you end up eating like after your workout? What's your post-workout? So we just did that arm workout. Like what would you do? Or do you stay fasted for a little while, or what do you?
So my appetite's typically suppressed, maybe not with something like an arm workout where it's not super taxing on the body, but if I do a leg day or something like that, my appetite's not very high. But I do like to get some sort of protein in to make sure I'm getting some amino acids into my bloodstream and actually kind of starting that recovery process. So typically I'll have some sort of fast digesting carbohydrate in the form of like a cluster dextrin, and then pair that with like a whey protein or something that's very fast digesting, get that into my system just as a shake. And then, 45 minutes, an hour down the line, I'll have a full meal, which will be higher in carbohydrates, lower in fats, and moderate protein.
Yeah. I want to focus a lot, just sort of the peri-workout window in this particular video, since we obviously just did the arm workout. Now I want to talk kind of the nutrition piece. Mm-hmm. So we'll figure with this, we'll kind of talk about like what you and I each do, maybe pre-workout, intra-workout, and post-workout,
sure.
And kind of keep it within that continuum. And then of course we'll do another episode talking a little bit more about your respective diet as a whole.
Sure.
So are you, like, for this given arm workout, we trained around 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
What was your pre-workout looking like on this?
So an hour and a half before, I had about 75 grams of carbs just in straight white rice, 25 grams of protein from like a lean protein, something that's not too high in fat because I didn't want to slow digestion of the carbohydrates going into the workout. So just like a lean ground beef and then white rice, and that's pretty much it. And then just go into the training session. Before my workouts, I'll have some sort of pump product that has like a glycerol in it, and then just decent amount of water, little bit of sodium electrolytes to help with my pump, and then right into the workout.
I was similar with the glycerol. I actually had some straight glycerol this morning, which is something I try to do, I don't know, once every couple weeks or so. I don't like overdo glycerol, but it's kind of interesting when we're talking about like chasing the pump in general and being able to actually like, flood the body with as much like volume as you can. I think that there is merit to that. I think that being able to nutritionally get that extra blood flow, that extra volume that you really need there, I think it does something. I think by actually encouraging nutrient delivery, but also just potential angiogenesis, like actually having
hydration.
Yep. Yeah. So it's even though I normally train fasted, so in this particular case, glycerol would technically break a fast. It does have calories, so it technically isn't fasting. But for all intents and purposes, I mean, I still went into it fasting.
You can still claim fasted,
Yeah. I mean, it's even so. For me, on an arm day, like I would usually almost invariably train fasted, just because if it's going to be specifically arms, it's not enough metabolic demand for me to feel like I need fuel or I'm at risk of catabolism.
Right.
And I feel like when I finish the workout, I'm a little bit more receptive to possibly nutrient uptake if I'm a little more insulin sensitive, if I'm not having to worry about like blasting a bigger body part that might have a stronger demand,
For sure. Yeah, I would say I'm similar. I'm a little bit less concerned when it comes to arms training. I don't typically do an arms training by itself, but if it was like a PM session or something like that where it is just arms, it's not super, taxing and fatiguing on the body, I don't think that it's necessary to be extremely hyper focused on peri-workout as much as it would be for a leg session or something.
Yeah. You mentioned cluster dextrin, which not everyone is necessarily familiar with. And first of all, what is cluster dextrin, just for people? And secondly, do you use it intra-workout ever or only post?
That's what I usually do. So, I mean, it's just fast digesting carbohydrates. It's going to be faster than you're not going to eat sweet potato during your workout or something along those lines. So the faster that you can get the nutrients into the muscle or into the body, the faster you're going to speed up that recovery process or get into that recovery process. So ideally, you have something either intra or post-workout. Now, if you want it pre-workout, it's probably not going to be something that's affecting your actual session, because that's going to be more the nutrition that you provide in the prior day. But for me, it's just something that allows me to get adequate nutrition in and around my workout to start that recovery process and hopefully get the most amount of hypertrophic benefits throughout the day.
Yeah. And it's a really minimal risk time from a fat accumulation perspective.
Yeah.
You have what's called the insulin independent glucose uptake, which is where basically it's the one time, like when you're actually mechanically moving a muscle, that you can absorb carbohydrates into a muscle, not only for utilization, but even for glycogen resynthesis without the use of insulin. So like basically the translocation of GLUT4 still occurs in an insulin independent fashion. So that's really good news for people that are maybe doing low carb or people that are insulin resistant or diabetic. It's like people think any carbohydrates are going to be problematic. I mean, the carbohydrates themselves are not problematic. It's the mechanism or the dysfunctional mechanism in people that are insulin resistant that is the problem, right? So when you're training, people often laugh at the fact that like sometimes if I'm doing hypertrophy work, I will have intra-workout carbohydrates and can still even remain low carb or ketogenic in that case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nutrient partitioning is probably one of the most underlooked aspects of like hypertrophy training, or even just how you're structuring your overall nutrition. Is like, if I'm putting carbohydrates in and around my workout, it's definitely going to affect my body much differently than it is before I go to bed.
Oh, for sure.
In the middle of the day, or if I'm just sitting, even simple things like that. It's something as simple as doing the movement, going through the motions, and actually, like, they talk about the studies of walking after a meal and how it affects like nutrient uptake. Well, training, the most hypertrophic stimulus, something like that. If you're having carbohydrates, something that's, going to actually help you build the muscle, having that in and around your training, having that better nutrient partitioning around your workout is something that's going to give you better results overall.
Yeah, for sure. And you're also aiding in recovery by, kind of kickstarting the process.
100%.
And you're not going to be dependent upon proper insulin function or insulin dynamics, right?
Absolutely.
So if you have someone that is, let's say someone is insulin resistant, or at the very least, not very insulin sensitive. If they were to try to allocate carbohydrates just to post-workout, they would be at the mercy of their insulin dynamics, right? So it's like if they don't have good functioning insulin, which by the way, insulin is a good thing. It's the chronic kind of insulinemia or even the absence of insulin that can be a problem. So if you take someone that's metabolically not flexible or whatever, and they just did a workout like that, and then they tried to load a bunch of carbs post-workout, the sort of, I don't know, the only variable standing in their way is, are they going to be able to have proper insulin function to get those carbohydrates into storage, right? And no matter if you're insulin resistant, type 2 diabetic, or just a regular person, you're going to be able to soak up those carbohydrates intra-workout. So it's like, that's the one time, if you're going for hypertrophy and you feel like you want them, that's the time to have your carbs. And that's the time to even like I'll drink watermelon juice or even have watermelon like during a workout. It's the time where I'm just like, as a low carb person, like, this is my time to enjoy this. You know?
I will say anecdotally, it feels different to have it in and around your workout. It doesn't feel the same as, you don't get the same crash as when you just have a ton of carbohydrates later on in the day or midday. When you're doing it during your training, it almost, this is 100% anecdote, but it almost feels like it's being utilized at a much better rate than it would be just sitting around or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I mean, and even though that's anecdotal, there is legit evidence to back it up too. Like it's, and for what it's worth, I think anecdotal evidence is sometimes even more important. You know, like what do you actually feel? Because like what's on paper is just what's on paper. You know, that's just what's been studied with the proper cohort. I mean, if you feel this something, that feeling is important, right? But there's evidence too that, I mean, the nutrient uptake or the glucose uptake, like if you were to have carbohydrates pre-workout, it's not like that's all just going to blood sugar. No. A lot of it's sitting in your, intestinal tract. You still have to, depend on all these different transporters. Some of it's going to go into glycogen, some of it's liver glycogen, muscle glycogen. You're not getting the same like effect. Whereas if you have it intra-workout, it doesn't have anywhere to go, but basically bloodstream immediately to use as fuel. So you find that the pump can be better. You find that the overall energy can be better. In my own anecdotal experience, like 50 grams of carbs intra-workout gives me way more energy than 50 grams of carbs pre-workout.
For sure.
Yeah.
100%. I agree.
What about post-workout, generally speaking? Like, I mean, obviously, like we haven't eaten yet on this, but if you're doing any kind of workout, let's say a leg workout versus an arm workout, like, do you eat immediately or do you give it a little bit of time? And
I'll almost always have a whey protein shake right after my workouts. This is something that's shifted over the years because before I was doing keto carnivore, so it'd pretty much just be a normal meal right after. But I have found that there's been benefits to having protein right after my training, and just getting right into that recovery state and actually having some sort of consistent flow of amino acids in your bloodstream. But I think at the end of the day, it's minutia, so long as you're not extending past, 3 hours, 4 hours beyond your workout and you're getting some sort of protein, I think it's kind of minutia at the end of the day, unless your goal is like competitive bodybuilding or something that needs to be very specific to it. So usually I'll have some sort of like about 25 grams of protein, post-workout scoop of protein, and then 45 minutes to an hour later, I'll have a full meal, which will have another 25, 30 grams of protein and then more carbohydrates to go along with it.
Do you vary your protein load and your carbohydrate load based upon the volume of the muscle that you train or the size of the muscle?
No, I keep my protein consistent across the week, across the days. Rest days are the same as training days, and they're just evenly spread out throughout the day. It's not something that I'm very particular about, rather compared to like carbohydrates.
Yeah, I think the evidence is quite strong that, like yes, you might burn through more carbohydrates in a leg day than, an arm day, but it seems like it's really splitting hairs to try to, as a matter of fact, you could even cause more just overall craziness and distress by trying to like undulate your carbohydrates. I think there's something to be said about stable and consistent insulin levels versus like major shifts all the time. I'm kind of the same way. Like for me, I'm obviously quite low carb, and when I do have carbs, they're usually pretty specific. So for me, it's that my carbohydrate intake is consistently on the low end, but it's consistent, right? It's not like really varying a whole lot.
For sure.
What about when it comes down to pre, post, even intra supplementation? Are you like creatine before training? There's kind of people out there that are saying, okay, I don't like to take creatine pre-training because I feel like it interferes with sort of the fasting effect. What's your take there?
I don't concern myself too much with fasting as a whole. I mean, I think my blood sugar levels are relatively stable throughout the day. I mean, that's based off of how I feel. But I don't concern myself too much with that with regards to creatine. Creatine, some potentially good cognitive benefits if they're higher dosages. So sometimes I'll take it in the morning. It's just kind of more part of my routine, similarly to like protein. Protein's just part of my routine at certain times spaced out throughout my day. So creatine I'll just take pre-workout just because it's easiest for me to get it in at that point. But other than that, like I'll take caffeine before my workouts. I think caffeine, like pump products like citrulline and glycerol, as we talked about, I think there's a lot of benefit to that when it comes to actual like hypertrophy training. But in the grand scheme of things, I think your overall nutrition throughout the day is going to have the greatest effect and going to change the outcome the most. So long as you're eating enough food to supply, like to fulfill recovery needs, you're not going to have issues with your workout and your training.
Yeah. If we come back to just sort of the idea of being able to build muscle, possibly burn fat in like a site-specific area, I know there's, it sounds very almost disingenuous when you start talking about spot reduction, but I do, in my own personal experience, feel that you can start to notice some significant changes in a given area, but part of me feels like it could be a genetic thing. Like it could be like, okay, am I already, like for example, I lean out through my core pretty darn quick. It just so happens that it pops more when I'm also training core a lot. So am I burning fat through that core training? Is it displacement? Is there a little bit of additional fat oxidation that's going on there? I know there was that study that Jeremy ETA put out, or talked about, and then I followed up on it too. It's kind of interesting. I mean, it seems as though there is a specific kind of training by kind of simultaneously doing some cardio with it, where you could squeak a little bit more spot reduction. And it's at this point, it's no longer just debunked. It's now considered plausible where, okay, maybe you can spot reduce, but I don't also want to mislead people and make them think that they can just go do a bunch of crunches and lose.
And to what degree?
Yeah, and I think it's a pretty advanced thing. Like it's usually people that are already pretty well trained, bodybuilders that, because for so many, I mean, as long as I can remember, like some of the top bodybuilders would say, yeah, when it gets, closer to competition time, I do higher reps of an area that I feel like I need to bring out more. And I do try to feel like, and there's been some, anecdotal stuff of people spot reducing in that area, but they're already at, 6% body fat getting down to 4, getting down to 3. So at that rate, maybe it's noticeable where it otherwise would not be noticeable at all.
Sure. I think there's probably something to muscle cells expanding when you train them. And I think that may give the appearance of you looking leaner. So for example, we just trained our arms from the beginning of the workout to the end of the workout. It's not likely that you lost body fat in your arms, but your arms may appear leaner because you're like filling the muscle up with blood, with nutrients, with all these different things. So I think with bodybuilding or hypertrophy training in particular, the greater effect is going to come from actually growing the muscle itself and the proportions. That's going to make it appear leaner than it would be actually spot reducing body fat. But like you said, there may be some minor things that do cause actual spot reduction. And one of those things, I guess, could be frequency of training and actually focusing in on that particular muscle group.
Yeah. I mean, I feel that that's probably the biggest, low-hanging fruit. I do feel like if someone is at a metabolic advantage of, what's interesting is you in particular, like you were keto carnivore for a very long time.
Yeah.
I was keto for a very long time, and I still am low carb, but not keto.
Right.
I think there is some strong, at least mechanistic evidence that I've seen that shows that maybe people that oxidize fat a little bit more efficiently, almost epigenetically, where they have established this more of what's in this case called PPAR alpha, which is like more that ability to oxidize fat in a low carb state, but also just when AMPK, when you're like basically in a trained state or a fasted state or a deficit state, i.e. through training or diet, where you might be more efficient at oxidizing fat. In other words, simple words, people that are better at oxidizing fat. I could see how if you were training in a higher rep range that is more aerobic, you could potentially oxidize fat from that area a little bit more because of the glycerol turnover.
Sure.
But we're getting into the weeds there. So there's a chance that you and I stay as lean as we are year round, not just because we have the genetics for it, but also probably because of some of our stint of doing low carb, which might have actually helped condition us to maybe get the result we want in a desired area, perhaps a little bit faster.
Potentially. Yeah. I think there could be something there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's all, it's speculation. You can't really, until we run a study on ourselves to see. But I think that like like you said, it is low hanging fruit to be so particular about one particular muscle group. Like I think the majority of people would benefit most from if they're trying to reduce that, make that particular muscle group look good. You're, for whatever reason, if you're going to an event, you want your arms to look good or this, that, or the other. Like if you generally reduce your overall body fat, that particular muscle group is going to look better.
Yeah.
That's just most often the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people, you know, the way that the satellite cells actually kind of fuse, and like you end up, when you train a muscle, there is a carryover pump that lasts a little bit longer too, right? So that's
Absolutely.
why, I mean, if people do frequently train arms,
they're going to be fuller more often.
yeah, they're going to be fuller more often. And there's also people, you know, sounds like a bad thing, but the localized inflammation that comes, it's like, you know, that does volumize a muscle to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And, you know, now we're starting to see evidence that like you're going to get more volume to a muscle when you take creatine and train that muscle, because you're basically concentrating more of that intracellular water. So it's like, okay, at what point is it just like a game of illusion and a game of just manipulating your body to look a certain way? But eventually that illusion does become a reality, because if you chase the illusion and you chase the pump because that's what you like eventually that turns into actual clay mass and real gains. It's not just a pump that you're walking around.
Yeah, if you're increasing the frequency of training that particular muscle group, for sure it'll grow.
Well, cool, man. Well, we'll keep this one simple since it's kind of tacked on to an arms video. But I think at the end of the day, my takeaways, and I'll kind of have you give your takeaways. You know, my sort of arm routine and what I do, like, is a workout like that. But I usually tend to do what we did on a day where I'm also maybe focusing on some cardio too, right? It's like for me, I might do a workout like that, but I'd also maybe do, you know, maybe I'd go for a run that day or something like that.
Sure.
And then I will usually tap into arms a couple other days per week for a couple of sets as auxiliary movements. So, and I feel like with that, going back to like Firas Zahabi, like his old days when he was talking on Joe Rogan years and years ago, like really stuck with me. He was talking about like the frequency of training. I am a fan of not obliterating a body part usually. I would rather have multiple touch points per week on that body part.
Yep.
So I've gotten much more into like almost full body training.
Upper, lowers, full bodies. Yep, absolutely.
And I just find that multiple touch points, but that does not deny you the fact that if you want particular growth in a given area, that area needs emphasis. So it'll be full body with a little more arm emphasis, and then maybe an extra arm day thrown in there.
Sure.
And then the nutrition is just nutrition.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for me, that's not a typical workout for me, I wouldn't say. I think the majority of my training just comes from straight sets and focusing on week over week, am I getting stronger with a particular muscle group, regardless of the muscle group. With arms in particular, because your recovery capacity, like you can recover very quickly from training your biceps. It's such a small muscle group. Triceps may take a little bit longer, but then again, compared to relative to legs, it's highly likely that you'll be recovered before doing another push session or whatever it is after 4 days. So the more frequency that you can get, the more volume you're probably likely to be able to get, the more you can progressively overload, and the more you can grow. So for me, it's finding, okay, well, you know, if my biceps are able to recover 2 days after I train them, or even 1 day after I train them, but my legs or my chest isn't recovered, why wouldn't I just train the biceps earlier?
Yeah.
Which is often the case, that you increase the frequency. So for me right now, the way my split looks is I train biceps or triceps on either any of my upper days. So I'm modified push-pull leg split. So on my push and my pull days, I have some sort of bicep movement, some sort of tricep movement. That increases my frequency to 2 to 3 times per week for each individual muscle group, and also allows for the recovery that it needs in order to get stronger week over week.
Yeah, that's straightforward, man.
Yeah.
And I think so many of us could just stand to go back to the basics.
For sure.
Like, are you getting stronger? Are you getting your protein in?
Yep.
You know, the real basics. The only one that I get a little bit squeamish on sometimes is the calorie discussion, because there's a lot of variables.
Yeah.
And you and I, we can talk about this in another video, but, you know, coming out of the low carb space, I've seen the other side of it. I've seen that maybe there's a lot of other things. So I try to discourage people from only thinking about that.
Absolutely.
What do I say? I usually say like it's okay to have the calories in the passenger seat, not the driver's seat, but they're definitely, if they're not a pilot, they're at least a co-pilot.
Sure.
They're extremely important. So I try not to, like, don't get hung up on that. If you're going to get hung up on something, get hung up on protein, and the rest tends to fall into place if you're getting a lot of. But you know, that's kind of my nutritional takeaway. But other than that, man, it's it's getting back to those core basics and common sense, you know?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
Well, Tristyn, once again, where can everyone find you, man?
Just Tristyn Lee across all of my socials, and that's pretty much it.
Right on, brother. Thanks, man.